As I speak to you now, cement is 8,400 per bag. At the beginning of this year, it was 4,500. So that's almost 100% increase just in 1 month. So you've gone to take a loan in December 2023. You've done all your projections. You've even given deposits to suppliers. You've even collected some deposits also from clients. And then by first week of February, everything is out of the window. So how do you maintain that 15 million naira house? And that civil servant, it is that 15 million naira that he can afford because he has a salary. His repayment cannot be more than 33% of his salary. Even the so-called affordable housing is no longer affordable.
Hello and welcome once again to The Big Issue. This is that big ticket governance show that delves into all of the matters that affect all and sundry in the 36 states of the Federation and of course the FCT. My name is Buchi Onyebule and I'm very glad to host you to today's show. Today we are going to be talking about what I consider a very serious pain point for many Nigerians, but one that is not as often dealt with as it should be. One that is not treated with the level of seriousness as it should be. And no, I'm not talking about security or fuel or education, all of these other issues that we've actually talked about on this show. Today, we'll be talking about housing in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Big Issue. I'm joined today by Abdul Malik Mahdi, who is the MD and CEO of Modern Shelter Systems. Welcome, Abdul Malik.
Thank you very much, Buchi.
During my introduction, I talked about housing being a very serious pain point, but one that's not given as much focus as it should be. So let's set the context here first. Do you agree that it is something that perhaps should be getting more attention than it currently is? And do you also agree with the point that I made in terms of maybe the fact that it's not given as much seriousness as it should be, and perhaps maybe, it's because all of these other issues are seen as more front burner matters?
Yes, I honestly agree with you, and I will tell you that in terms of the hierarchy of needs of the economic theory, housing, shelter is actually after food. The next thing is shelter, right? And when you look at the trajectory of a human life from when you are given birth to, it should be in a shelter in a hospital. You move to your parents' house, you grow up, you get your own house. You work in an office, or you need somewhere to live in. Shelter is a primal need for human beings, right? And we in Nigeria here, over the years, it has taken a backseat. There are a lot of government policies. There are a lot of noises around housing as a human right, housing as part of Millennium Development Goals, as far back as Vision 2020. Or those goals that we used to hear as kids by the year 2000, by the year 2000, XYZ. There have been several interventions, from Surulere to Festac as a development, to Shagari housing, to Jakonde housing, different times and different efforts. But there has not been any consistent thread up until now to clearly attack this. What I would say is that up until now, because the current Minister of Housing, so for the first time in Nigeria, we have a Minister of Housing that understands the industry, that came from the industry, and that is clearly focused on putting together all the building blocks, because there are different buckets of government activity, from Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Corporation to Federal Housing Authority to family home funds. They are all doing sort of the same thing, and there's supposed to be synergy between all.
Before you get to that point, because when I said I wanted us to, set the context, I want to first of all look at what exactly, what the challenge is, what the situation is currently. We have a housing deficit of about 28 million housing units for Nigerians, yes, as at the year 2023. But when we hear this phrase, housing deficit, it might not exactly be clear to many like me who are neophytes in the space or who don't know next to nothing about the space. So what does that housing deficit mean? Just help us paint that picture of what the current situation looks like in terms of we and our deficit.
Okay, so what a housing deficit, what it means is that there are 28 million Nigerians that are actually living in subpar housing environment. So if somebody has a buka or somebody has a bacha, somebody sleeping under the bridge, technically he has shelter, he's sleeping somewhere, but that is subhuman, right? And it's not ideal.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to come with ventilation, sanitation, security, it has running water, those basic necessities. 28 million does not mean that all those 28 million should own a house. Because there are people that might well go through their whole life renting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you have access to housing. The house is available for you to rent, right? So in terms of availability, that's what we're talking of, 28 million. And some of them, a lot of them, even in our villages, are also actually living in their huts and all that. And we don't consider that, you know, as what in 21st century that people are living in those places without windows, you know,
Yeah.
without flooring, without heating, without ventilation. And that's why you get a lot of diseases. You have a lot of insecurity because housing ties into every single activity. Even if you are doing agriculture, the farm workers must live somewhere. There's
yeah.
plantation agriculture. And if the people live next to their houses, and if you are doing, you go to nomadic cattle rearers, for example, you want to settle them, that ruga is a settlement. What is it? Shelter. Do you understand? And if you have housing around it, those people will settle down, and then those insecurity, security issues between farmers and herders, clashes, you know, will be done away with.
Yeah.
So a lot of our issues, when you look at schools, for example, you need to have hostels. That's also shelter. You need to have some housing for the teachers that teach the students, you know, and that will help the teacher focus. When we were growing up, all our teachers used to live on campus, you know, especially in boarding schools,
Yeah.
and then they had time for us. But now somebody is struggling on where to live. How do you think it's going to impact on the classroom environment? How is he going to teach well when he knows that his roof is leaking or his landlord has chased him out, or as a teacher he does not have a decent 2-bedroom to go back to? That should not be it should be the least of his worries, you know, as a public servant or as somebody, a
Who
doctor,
has a
a
job.
nurse, exactly, you know, people that are contributing to the growth of the country. And when you are building a single unit of house, I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, you know, the statistics are you create a lot of jobs. If you have 100 units, for example, or even 10 units, you are building 10 units of bungalows anywhere in Nigeria, you end up not employing less than, you know, 500 people, you know, directly and indirectly. At least 100 people work in your site directly. And outside that, you have the value chain, people that will produce the paint, that will sell the paint, people that will actually apply the paint, that's the painters. You have the people that will do screeding, you have people that will do tiling, you have roof, you have carpenters, you have all sorts of artisans and tradesmen that will actually feed, you know, and, you know, hone their skills and also pass those skills to the next generation, because not everybody that can work for government.
Yeah.
You know, and not everybody can be a vulcanizer or just a trader or people running. You see people running after cars, you know, selling chewing-gum and sweets. How much is their whole capital and how much are they making, you know, in a day? But a tiler, you know, this is somebody that has a skill that actually can be transferred internationally. You can go to Canada today and be tiling, you know, and make a lot of money.
Yeah, let's not talk about Canada because let's not give people much more reasons to think. You know, yeah. So, what are the issues that are preventing us from bridging this deficit? And when I'm asking you this question, I'm not necessarily asking you in terms of, you know, why are government not building houses, and we'll come to that. I want you as a practitioner in this space, as a player in the sector, what are the issues that you think contributes to this our current housing deficit?
Okay, first and foremost, you see, we are not operating in a vacuum. So the macroeconomic issues will definitely affect all industries, and housing is not exempted.
Yeah.
So while as property developers, we do our best to meet up the supply of housing, you know, the challenges that we face are multitude. You know, we have the issues around land acquisition. So typically, you have to buy land, and where you buy land, there's no infrastructure. So you have to, as a developer, buy land, provide infrastructure. Then you have issues, access to finance, right? Banks are not lending to real estate developers. They are not interested in housing as a sector or real estate as a sector. Most banks just, you know, pay lip service to financing real estate. Now, as a former banker, I also know that it is that banks are not really set up to do the business of real estate, right? To be fair to them. So it's also an issue of the level of development of our financial system. What debt instruments do we have? Do we have REITs, which is real estate investment trust schemes? You know, do we have the pension funds going after real estate assets, providing liquidity, long-term liquidity that is needed, patient capital for real estate? We're still not yet there, right? So these issues of access to land, access to finance, will always be a barrier to entry or reduce the extent of houses we can produce. So instead of producing, you know, 1 million houses a year, for example, you know, we are limited to producing less than 100,000 a year. And when you have 28 million you're chasing as a figure that is growing because of our bulging youth population, and you're producing less than 1 million houses a year, you are not going to catch that that shortfall. And then the purchasing power of the people buying these houses also, because it's a mix and match. If I build 1,000 houses today now and put it in the market, are there really 1,000 people that have, is there an effective demand? Out of that 28 million, how many people can actually buy a house today if you put it in the market? So it's, the macroeconomy plays a huge role. And then the fact that for, you know, up until May 29th, 2023, there's no clear housing policy and clear housing direction. From that time to now, we're seeing clarity with this renewed hope cities, renewed hope vision in terms of what the government wants to do, to bring together all the players in terms of Federal Mortgage Bank, Federal Housing Authority, Family Home Funds, you know, Nigerian Mortgage Finance Corporation, to see how we can come up, you know, with a policy that will allow the ordinary Nigerian be able to buy a house. And where there's demand, there will be supply. Because if I know that there's a house of 15 million, 20 million that I can build, and there are people waiting to buy these houses, be them civil servants, be them independent businessmen, or, I mean, young employed people that are, you know, into tech or whatever, but there's an effective demand at the end of the road, people will go back and design those houses. Now, going back to the macroeconomy, which is the biggest challenge that we have now. Now we have runaway inflation. As I speak to you now, cement is 8,400 per bag, right? At the beginning of this year, it was 4,500. So that's almost 100% increase just in 1 month, right? So how do we cope? How do you plan? How do you, so you've gone to take a loan in December 2023, you have planned an estate, you have planned everything, you've done all your pricing, you've done all your projections, you've even given deposits to suppliers, you've even collected some deposits also from clients. And then by first week of February, everything is out of the window, right? So how do you maintain that 15 million naira house? And that civil servant, it is that 15 million naira that he can afford because he has a salary, and everything must be, his repayment cannot be more than 33% of his salary. So we find ourselves in a position whereby even the so-called affordable housing is no longer affordable because the guy also has school fees to pay. You know, the woman has, you know, the family to feed. They must take care of their health needs. You know, all fuel has gone up. You know, so there are a lot of things that they are contending with, that maybe buying a house is no longer as high a priority in their to-do list as it was before because the money is simply not there. Even when you take their pension contribution into account, they do joint mortgages and do all that. Once the price of the house keeps moving, right, it is just not affordable anymore.
And that's actually a question I wanted to ask you, because if you drive around Abuja, for example, which is the city you and I live in, if you drive around Abuja from Lugbe to Kasana to Maitama to Asokoro to Jabi, any of these places to Guzape, any of these places where there are new developments, where expansion is happening in the city, you see a lot of terrace duplexes, 4-bedroom townhouse. Most of the estates that are being marketed, you know, that are being built by, you know, people in the sector such as yourself, this is what we see more of. We rarely see options of, you know, affordable 2-bedroom flats, you know, things like this. Because if the macroeconomics are pointing to high cost of you know, of building a 3-bedroom, you know, duplex or whatnot, shouldn't it make sense to build more affordable housing? Why is it that there seems to be a tilt towards more high-end kind of homes?
So typically, you see, there are two things involved here. and the two are not mutually exclusive. The issues are, if I have land now in Abuja,
Yes.
and it's not concession, I bought the land.
Yes.
I'll buy it at premium.
Yes.
So if I buy it at premium, I cannot put a cheap house. I have to pay for the cost of the land, which is about 30% of the cost of construction, right? So, and if it is in Katampe or Maitama or even Wuse or even Wuye or Karsana, like you pointed out, the price is there. So I have to first recover that investment. Nobody goes into business to lose money. And to the extent that government is not giving developers land anymore, right? And is not providing infrastructure in places that land is relatively cheap, right? Because in Abuja, once you provide infrastructure in an area, the prices go up.
So there's no hope of land being cheap.
So no, well, there is. And there is something that the minister has started to do recently, which I feel should be given a lot of kudos to. So people that have not built their land is being revoked, right? People that have not paid ground rent for so long. Because what happens in Abuja typically is that a new government comes in, they take a district, they pour in money to develop that district, and then CFOs are shared to the people in government and their cronies. All you need to do is apply, and then you end up getting land in Maitama 2 for 10 million naira. You just pay you pay a premium for the CFO bill, 10 million, 20 million. And then you just walk out of the ministry with your CFO and sell it for 250 million. So the rent seeking in land and land racketeering in Abuja, because I call it land racketeering, every Nigerian is entitled to get a plot. So typically the civil servants in government, whoever is in power, they're all entitled, right? But there's no balloting, there's no merit-based, transparent way in which this land is being allocated. So you go to Katampe Extension, you find that they're all ministers during Obasanjo's government and all those people in power at that point in time. They're the ones that have the land. And now they keep it for 20 years. They now bring it. We approach them to develop it on a joint venture. Then they earn 1 billion, 2 billion naira just for applying for land and collecting it. Meanwhile, that 2 billion naira, none of it is going to go to the FCT ministry to recover the cost of infrastructure that was provided with your money, you as a Nigerian. Typically, the FCT should recover from those luxury developments, monies, that they use to develop infrastructure there so that they can provide affordable housing. Do you understand? Not even necessarily in that same district, but they can also provide council flats in that place, right? And say, okay, this thing typically in the market will be 60 million, but because it's our own, and we're building it with the people's money, take it at 15 million. Or they will say, okay, developer, hey, come, I'm going to give you 10 hectares here. I want you to build 3 hectares that you build that will be my own in terms of like a JV. The 30% that will come to government, that 30%, government will now subsidize it. Because government is not interested in making money per se. Government is interested in fighting housing as a housing deficit. Now, government can now say, okay, you know what, in this estate, even the luxury estates, 30% must go to civil servants. And that 30% that belongs to me, because I gave you the land free, give it to my civil servants, right? Give them at discounted rates. That's how civil servants were able to live in Gariki, Wuse 2, and those in those days. Because it was
which cannot happen now.
Because government is not building those council flats anymore. And nobody can build those council flats at that price. Because those houses, if you go, even to put picture on the frame, because it's concrete, well-built, Julius Berger standard, there is no way. I mean, those companies, I mentioned one, let me mention Setraco and all those other guys that built Abuja, right? It is well built. But today, if you try to build that kind of thing, there is no civil servant in Abuja that can afford it because the price is too high. So everywhere in the world, government enters into housing and subsidizes this housing. There is no way people can use their money, never ever, to afford housing because land is expensive, infrastructure is expensive. So you are doing housing so that you can have people in a secure environment, provide healthcare for them, provide security for them, and tax them. Because you know where they are, you have their identity, you have their address. So we are now able to provide services to them and then also collect taxes. And then they can also walk close to where their offices are. And everybody is happy in the long run. So we need to understand that housing is a human right. Housing is needed. It's for everybody. It's not just for a few people that will just build their high walls, put barbed wire, and then that's end. The other people are left behind. The way government has helped agriculture in the past 20, 25 years have always, every government comes, it has an intervention project or program in agriculture. They spend hundreds of billions of naira in agriculture. Food is very good. I'm not arguing, I'm not saying it's not good, but it is equally as important as housing. Right? You go to power sector, you see intervention. Even your creative arts, you see intervention. But there's no intervention in housing because they all the people that are making those laws and they all have houses they are living in. So it's not an issue for them. They don't see it as an issue, and they just believe that their driver can live in any of these shanty towns or in bachas. And then, I mean, really, nobody really sees housing as a security threat, and they don't see housing as an employment generator, a revenue generator for government.
I'll come back to you on that because, you know, if a government person was listening that now, they'll say, oh, but we've built XYZ number of units and all of that. And I actually wanted to ask you about that so that we can unravel a bit what that reality is. But I like how you've taken us through, you know, some of these barriers in terms of what the macroeconomics are, what including, of course, the runaway inflation that you described, the land situation, and then other issues that are very clearly failures of government. But all of this we'll talk about after a very, very short break. You've been watching The Big Issue. My name is Buchi Onyebule, and I've had Abdul Malik Mahdi, who's the MD and CEO of Modern Shelter Systems, in the studio with me, and we've been talking about Nigeria's housing deficit. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Big Issue. My name is Buchi, and I've been in the studio with Abdul Malik Mahdi, who's the MD and CEO of Modern Shelter Systems. Malik, you were talking about, you know, you were tracing some of the issues that we've had, you know, the barriers to basically fixing our housing deficits. And you were actually dwelling a bit on affordable housing. And during our break, Charity asked that question, you know, why can she not get affordable houses? And you talked about the government and the supply point. And I want you to talk about any other issues that you feel has contributed to this.
Well, so you see, again, developers, we also have a duty of care. We have to understand the size of the pyramid. We are trying to address the top end of the market, the 1%, the people that we feel have cash to give us, and then we take care. Nobody is looking at affordable market because of the challenges in affordable market. The challenges of affordable housing, now, we come and get a plot of land. Let's say the government gives us a plot of land. Finally, we get a plot of land. We go and design houses that are for the affordable market. So typically a normal house for, you know, semi-luxury level will be like 300 square meters, 340 square meters for a 4-bedroom terrace.
Yeah.
For an affordable house, it would be maybe 150, right, or 120 square meters. Now, we have a problem with Nigerians not wanting to cut their coat according to their cloth. Cutting your coat according to your cloth, not to your size. If you look at the houses that government has built in Abuja that we refer to in FCT, Garki, and all those places, even in Festac in Lagos, these are houses that were built for affordable housing and for civil servants and all that. You see that they are small. Yeah. Probably have 2 toilets, you know, for a 3-bedroom.
I had one in Festac.
Exactly. For one toilet, probably sharing. Now, the typical Nigerian, over time, we've developed a very huge appetite. Everybody tells you they want all the rooms en suite. So why do you have 4 toilets in a 3-bedroom house? Why do you need 4 toilets? You don't need 4 toilets. Even where we go, when we travel abroad, some of us that have been privileged to travel, you see a big house and only 2 toilets, 5 bedrooms, 2 toilets. Because every single toilet seat you buy is extra cost. Every space that you are putting as toilet is space that is also extra cost to the house. And then we have the issue of distance, right? Typically, in this Abuja, people have been coming to Abuja to work from Kefi, Suleja, Gwagwalada, Abaji, to come to work in city center in Abuja. So why can't people, especially younger people, why don't they want to live on Airport Road? That's not even up to airport. This Airport Road, I'm telling you, 20 years ago, it was just single lane, 2 lanes, you know, of 2-2. Yeah. So now you have expressway that from airport to town is no more than 40 minutes. In fact, there's even a metro coming along.
But everybody, because when you talk about the metro part, right, that actually points to why people are not so willing to leave.
But to live before the recent increase of fuel, right? Before the increase of fuel recently, I mean, fuel was cheap, but people will tell you, they want, maybe because of security, but then you have estates. Estates give you security because within the estate, by and large, you have your single gate, you have your estate management, and everything is fine. But you have to live away from city center, which is suburban life, which everywhere in the world, middle class or aspiring middle class people, nobody lives in town, in the city center. It's not meant for everybody, right? When everybody said Abuja is not meant for everybody, it sounded like condescending, insulting, and all that. But in reality, when you look at it in context of what it meant, it is that people have to live in satellite towns, and that's why they have Satellite Towns Development Agency in the FCT. Because when you develop Kubwa is bigger than a lot of state capitals today in Nigeria. Same thing with Lube, same thing with Kuje, with better infrastructure and everything. All you need to do is carpool or you use your staff bus to come to work. We have a site in Karu, just 17 kilometers from Federal Secretariat, right? And there are buses coming from there. But we speak to civil servants and they say, no, I don't want outside town, right? So at some point, you can only take a horse to the river. You can't force the horse to drink. That's the truth. Because now government has provided RSA, you can use 25% of your pension fund as equity contribution, which was one of the biggest barriers to entry when you're accessing mortgage. They've increased the amount that you can take under the National Housing Fund to 50 million, which obviously a lot of civil servants still can't afford it. That 15 million is still their cap, right? So there are many ways that in actual sense, if you really want to get a house, right, and you really want to explore the market, there are people that are building affordable housing. We are building 1,200 along the Karu Expressway. Around Kubwa Expressway here, I know a developer that is building 5,000 houses, right? And these are all houses that are within 25 million naira and below. There's 1 bedroom, there's 2 bedroom, there's 3 bedroom. And there's even expandable house that you can buy a 3 bedroom or a 2 bedroom and expand it later according to your means. Some of these houses are semi-finished, which means that when you buy it, according to your taste and according to your pocket, you can incrementally improve the house, to meet your family needs as they also increase. And also as your income increases to match your income. Where government needs to come in is to provide infrastructure linking the city center where people work with the satellite towns where they live, such that the satellite towns are maybe 30 minutes, 1 hour at most, commute time. Because commuting 1 hour in major cities is not even a big deal. But here we make it sound like, oh, I'm driving for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, like that's the end of the world. It's really not a big deal to commute 30, 35 minutes. It's not. As long as it's in a safe, and affordable manner.
But if I'm commuting 40 minutes to work in Abuja, then how do I drag Lagos people? I have to have bragging rights. But that's just a way to just move us into the other part of the question I want to ask. So let's
consider just before I forget, and don't forget I said you don't have to own a house yet. So you finish school at 23, 24. You are not qualified or eligible to own a house. But you should have somewhere that you can rent a 1 bedroom or at most a 2 bedroom. And it should be available for you. So that is also part of housing, right? For you to have house to rent.
Yeah, but if there's a housing deficit, then it will affect even the way the amount of money that I'm going to pay for the rent.
Definitely. So I'm just saying that let's not focus only on ownership, right? And don't forget also in the earlier part of the show, I told you that government at all levels, the policies coming up with the FCT particularly because this is where we are. And then what the Ministry of Housing is also attempting to do with the Renewed Hope Cities, Renewed Hope Housing Agenda, we have to give them a chance to see how it performs. But because for the first time, we clearly see a government that is addressing housing squarely as a national emergency. Because up until now, everybody that comes is just, after maybe the 10th or 11th ministry they look at. Everybody wants to build road. Everybody wants to just give defense money.
It's a lot more visible.
Yes.
Which I want to ask about, when you talk about the money part, I want to ask about mortgage, because you've referred to it a couple of times. You've talked about the housing funds and whatnot, right? I don't think that is something Nigerians, attempt to use a lot, because when we talk about mortgage, especially when developers like yourself, you know, we see the flyers, we're like, oh, you know, for example, I'm going to be 37 soon. I'm firmly in that space where I should be on a mortgage or owning a house, and I'm not a politician. I don't earn billions of naira, so I cannot just, you know, whip out my wallet and say, oh, I'm going to buy that house that I'm seeing. So the question I want to ask is, what options are available to me beyond looking at what is being called a mortgage by the developer, yet I'm seeing 18-month payment plan, which is not a mortgage as far as I'm concerned.
A payment plan is different from mortgage.
Yeah, but they still call it that, which is
no. Well, I mean, this is probably unscrupulous marketers and all that, which unfortunately they are there, and people should do due diligence before going to buy a house. But there are mortgage options available, and I'll tell you two categories. There are government-backed mortgages, which is the National Housing Fund under the Federal Mortgage Bank, which is disbursed through primary mortgage institutions. So there are banks that are primary mortgage institutions, mortgage banks, that the only business they're allowed to do is mortgages. You know, and they can draw from that National Housing Fund. You contribute 2.5% of your basic salary to that fund monthly to make you eligible to take up to 50 million. So depending on your age, so the tenor is 60 minus your current age, right? And that money is at 6%. So it's at single digits and it's provided to people that are contributors to that fund.
So if you're a contributor today, and if you start
contributing today, you just need 6 months contribution, which you can pay at once.
And you're eligible.
You are eligible from the pool. So what you need to do is to find the house that matches what you can afford. And that's where the mortgage advisory comes in, or mortgage brokerage, or the developer that has that knowledge that can sit you down and say, oh, Buchi, this is how much you earn. Okay, this is your monthly repayment. And so this is how much you can afford, right? And then we match it to the property that you can take. Yes, so if you are lucky, it's in town or closer to what you want, fine and good. It all depends on what you earn. And if it is in Karu, then so be it. But it is your house, right? And by the time you're not paying rent, it gives you certain security, certain comfort. I can tell you my personal example. By the time I got my own house, the year I started living in my house, that was the first year that I went on vacation abroad. Because the money I was using to pay rent is the one that I now used to buy ticket. Of course, now it cannot happen because ticket has gone up. But I mean, just to show you that it gives you a lot of savings, right? You can save that money, you can invest it in stock, in shares, or you can blast it on a holiday. Whatever you do, it gives you focus. You know, owning a house, that shelter, that your own premises, right? So there are government mortgages available. FHA, Family Home Funds is there. Federal Housing Authority is there. Federal Mortgage Bank is there. They need to do more for Nigerians to know and to know how to access them, right? They need to do a lot more advocacy. They need to go out there and people need to know what they're even paying for. There are lots of people that contribute National Housing Fund, they don't know what it is for.
Yeah.
And then since there are no houses also for them to use to buy, then that money is just there. Because if the houses are available, I want 15 million, and what I can take is 15 million, there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
So, but now the supply is increasing. The supply side is coming up, you know, to provide those houses that people can afford. So even if you are living in Wuse with your family and you already have a house, nothing stops you from using your NHF to buy a house in Karu, for example, and put it out for rent. Because in 10 years, that house will be like Asokoro. Because Karu of 10 years is not Karu of today. And in real estate, that's how it works. If we've been in this Abuja, where we are now in Jahi, 10 years ago was bush. Just 10 short years ago, this whole place was bush. But today now, you cannot find a house of less than 100 million here, right? So this is how it works. Then the commercial mortgages are also there. Banks give up to 20 years mortgages now, depending on where you work. Typically, that's not affordable for civil servants, but there is a mortgage for 20 years because the complaints have always been around tenor, which is the time, and the
interest rate.
And the rate. So if you cannot afford bank rates, you can go to FMBN and take up to 50 million, right, at 6% for up to 30 years. So it is actually available, but we don't know. The problem is in that advocacy, in that dissemination of knowledge, and also making people understand that they can use their RSC, because most NHF contributors, if not all, are also under the PENCOM pension scheme. So they can use 25% of that money that they've kept to use it as equity contribution. So you can actually buy a house. You now, you are sitting. We can just go upstairs and you can buy a house using your 25%. You know, and you just fill a form. So no money comes out of your pocket.
Oh, so I can buy a house then? That's
you can,
good.
but you don't know.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know. You know, and that advocacy, the cost of that advocacy, the reach, is only government that can actually do that. You know, and we're happy that they are starting to do it. You know, because it's not good to always be bashing government. We have to give government kudos where we see them doing the right thing.
All right. Thank you very much, Malik. And this is just perhaps a very good way to bring the show to an end on this first conversation, because I'm pretty sure that we'll be talking about housing going forward, and there's so many faces to actually explore on this issue. And hopefully, with all of you who have been watching, who have been following this, maybe you can now think about owning a home. I'm thinking very much about owning a home, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you very much, Malik, for joining me today. Much. All right, you've been watching The Big Issue. My name is Buchi Onyebule, and today I've been in the studio with Abdul Malik Mahdi of Modern Shelter Systems, and we've been talking about Nigeria's housing deficit, but our focus has actually been more around owning a home. Maybe another time we can talk about rents and landlords, which I'm pretty sure will get a lot of comments, and maybe then we'll even do a vox pop to sample people's opinion on the streets. Please follow the rest of our shows on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcast. We'll be seeing you soon.